The prodigal child has returned.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Also, I'm drinking homemade kombucha.
Ooh.
Blueberry, lavender, and mint. What's so good.
My only experience with kombucha was once after camp. We were having our education team meeting, and Emily brought her kombucha, and I was like, "Oh, I've never tried kombucha." And her, Claire, and Joanne all looked at each other, and they're like, "Try it."
That tracks. It's a mean trick. Hello, Alan.
Hey, Aaron.
How are you, buddy?
Oh, just trekking the good old long trek.
Yep. Keep it on. Keep it on. As one might say.
I was trying to think of a saying that was kind of hitting the old dusty trail, but to mean, I'm still fucking slogging through life in a poetic way. And I just came short. So that's what we've got.
I think what instead we should do is rewrite the Wicked song Dancing Through Life to Slogging Through Life. Because that's how it feels right now. It's just very, very sort of like Gen Z, millennial, nihilist, absurdist humor, just slogging through life.
Kristen Chenoweth, if you're interested, please, you can find us at The Fic List on Twitter.
We have an email account that you could reach out to us to if you didn't want to go the public route. Yeah. theficlist@gmail.com.
Everyone, tweet Kristen Chenoweth and let her know we're interested in collaborating.
Yeah, for sure. This also is a fun segue into one of our fics for this episode. LOLOL.
We're so good at transitions.
I know, so good transitions. So that's a really great segue for one of the fics that we are reading for today's AU tag. Alan,
yes, Erin.
What is our AU for today?
Oh, I think we might have been hungry when we were deciding, and we were like, what'd be great? Some pizza. And then the pizza boy came, and he was hot. And that's about it. And then we were like, oh, hey, let's make a pizza boy au.
What a lovely, completely false narrative for how we came up with this tag. It is a lie. There was no pizza boy. We are in separate locations.
This is accurate. My pizza boy is now very much a pizza man who's in his 60s. Lovely gentleman, but...
Yeah, not the same. The real story behind this is actually kind of cool. We have a fic rec Google form through which y'all are welcome to submit recommendations for us to read fanfics. And my friend Caitlin, who is our one and true oldest, truest fan, is so far the only person to have taken advantage of this particular form, which tracks for us. But
this one's for you, Caitlin.
Yeah, this is for you, Caitlin. This is also a surprise. So hi, happy quarantine. She sent this fic that was a pizza boy fic, and therefore we now needed to do a pizza boy AU episode for her so we could talk about this fic. We'll get to that. I think we should save that one for the end, just to
oh, absolutely,
give Caitlin a small heart attack. But yeah,
1000%.
So in the meantime, we should talk about the fics that we sent each other that we chose.
Yeah, so I think we should launch into them. But first, Aaron, I want to know, what do you look for in a good pizza boy AU?
I don't, because I've never read this AU before. I literally was like, what the fuck? This is Caitlin's favorite AU. What is this? But I think the more I think about it, it's an opportunity to be a little bit of crack taken kind of seriously.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's kind of fun. It's just a very stupid...
Oh my god.
In the sense of just the potential for it to get really silly really fast is high, which is kind of fun. And that's the very opposite from the usual dark, grim nonsense I usually go for. So having the opportunity to sort of delve into some just kind of silly things was fun. And I think it's kind of like coffee shops with the chance encounter possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of nice, where there's a potential for just two people happening across each other, particular scenario, and hitting it off. That said, as a former Chinese food delivery girl, I do not necessarily approve of hitting on service workers because their tips often depend on being nice to you. So,
yeah.
I wouldn't take pizza boy AUs as instruction manuals for how to get a significant other, because service workers deserve safe workplace environments free from harassment. But Yeah, I mean, other than that particular concern, like this is just kind of a silly fun thing. Had you read them before? Was that a thing that you liked or no?
No. First of all, I need to say I did not know you were a Chinese food delivery girl, and I feel cheated.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I feel
so
lied
the short
to.
version of that story is that I used to work at a hibachi / Chinese restaurant for like 6 years through the end of high school and all through college. And I was front of house, which really meant I just did anything my boss told me to do. That was it. So I had a car, so they were like, all right, well, when we're slammed, we're going to send you out on delivery.
Right.
Mostly I was a hostess and bartender, but I did occasionally do deliveries.
Ah, interesting. Good to know. Good to know. I had not ever read any Pizza Boy Yaoos because to me, it was always the pizza boy trope has always been very much like a porn thing.
Oh.
You know,
yeah.
like that's where it lived for me. And not that I've ever seen. I'm trying to think back. I don't know that I've ever seen Pizza Boy.
We're
or
learning
porn.
something about Alon in this episode.
That's why I was so like interested when you started off. I was like, oh yeah, it's like a silly like AU. I was like, oh, my first thought was like smut.
Alan, sweetie.
It's like smut adjacent.
Don't forget who you're talking to. My asexual ass still thinks Netflix and chill means cuddling on the couch, okay?
Yeah, that was gonna be a question that I was grappling with. I was like, is it like insensitive of me to ask? Do you think it's because you're asexual you didn't immediately think sex with the pizza boy?
Yeah, it is it's not insensitive. It's true. That's 100% what happened. Because I definitely am like, oh yeah, I forgot. That's like a huge porn thing.
Yep.
Of course it is.
But now hearing it from the delivery person's like point of view, I'm like, oh, I guess it is very demeaning. Oops.
Yeah, it's fine. Fantasy is different than real life. Like, that's important. And I think we can all be adults and remember that, right?
Very true. Very, very true. So since we were talking about slogging through life, should we head off into what I sent you?
Mm-hmm. If I remember what you sent me. I took notes this episode. Because
I don't know her.
I know. Like quarantine is changing who I am fundamentally at the molecular level. Mostly because I knew that it was going to be a while between when we read these and when I talked to you about them, and that has not historically gone well for me. So I was like, I'll take notes and it'll be fine. So you sent me to, we didn't really segue super well. It's sort of a delayed
we had a really good segue, then we just kind of
destroyed it, as we usually do. Yeah.
Correct.
So this fic that Alan sent me is called Pizza Pizza by Mustache Babs, which is funny. I like that name a lot. It is a Wicked fanfic, which is why it's a good segue. I have never read Wicked fanfic, but you bet your ass I know every word of that musical because I saw it twice in my life and listened to it all the time, and we definitely sang For Good in my like high school graduation.
Oh yes.
Theater kid, whatever. Everyone thought they could hit the high note. None of us could hit the high note. It's a thing. So this fic, the summary reads: Galinda is a pizza delivery person, and one of her regular customers presents an opportunity to turn her life around. Which is short and sweet, to the point. I think it doesn't give it it's like a good summary, but it's not like stellar. Like it doesn't do too much service it doesn't like sell it super well, but it is accurate. Like sometimes you get summaries that like aren't necessarily the actual fic that you're about to read. That's like what this is. It is really short. It's 4 chapters, but 3,452 words. So it went by like so fast reading it. And like overall, it was just very like simple, kind of silly, and I really appreciated that this was Femslash.
I know.
Yeah, and I was like shocked to shit that you were the one that sent me Femslash, and not me to you.
Listen, no one was more surprised than I was.
No one was more shocked than the gay man in this friendship. So it's Elphaba and Galinda, which of course makes sense. Like, yeah, if you're gonna do Wicked, then that's the ship in terms of femme ships.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Galinda is like a super broke pizza delivery girl, which I thought was fascinating because if you go back to the musical, Glinda is like a hyper popular rich girl, and just like it was a big kind of shift for me in terms of having her be a little bit on the back foot the whole time, when she in the musical is sort of the one who is always a step ahead.
Right.
So she's a pizza delivery girl. She's like trying to make ends meet. She has a regular who is Elphaba on Wednesdays who orders the same pizza all the time, and like they sort of like talk to each other and it's a thing. But Glinda has a shitty housing situation and is trying to figure out a new place to live. And one day she notices that Elphaba has a sign out front that is like, oh, room for rent. And she's like, I know this isn't super like professional as a pizza girl, but I would be very interested in learning more about this potential rental opportunity from you. Thank you. And Elphaba's like, oh yeah, sure. So she invites her in and they like have a conversation about, you know, renting a room. And Glinda's like, that's great. I want in. Dope. So they become roommates.
Yes.
And then they were roommates.
Roommates.
I'm just going to make that joke every single time.
It's a classic.
Yeah. And it goes really well. And like the whole fic is really just like her moving in. Like that's what the fic is, which is fascinating. And let me go back to my notes because what I think I wrote was, it's a little fast in the exposition, believable enough, but the tone is kind of stilted and overly simplistic. Like, it just reads like, hello, do you have a rental house for me? Yes, I do. This is great. Would you like to put your boxes down over here? Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Miss, whatever your last name is. What's Elphaba's last name? I forget.
Throp.
Miss Throp. And it's like, oh, just don't call me Miss Throp. Call me Elphaba. And then I was like, okay. So it was just a little stilted, but I was like, okay, cool. And as you well know, I live for world building in fics, and this has like none. This is all like dialogue, which is cool.
Yep.
Oh, the other note that I made was that the moving stress in this fic, like the secondhand stress I got from her having to move was like real. And this author has clearly had to move apartments under duress before. Like 100% has done it. And I was like, okay, this person has definitely experienced this, which is super funny. It got a little bogged down in the mechanics of what was happening in that regard, where it was like, and then we move the couch, and then we like do we have the space for this, and blah blah blah. So it kind of got, you know, it was that, but it was like very believable. Like I was like, okay, I like buy this, I'm on board. A lot of the side characters make an appearance. Fiyero makes an appearance as like Elphaba's friend. Bach, I think, is Glinda's friend. And then it's going along, and then there's a huge time jump on chapter 4. So chapters 1, 2, and 3 are basically what I just described. And then chapter 4, the summary of that particular chapter says that this takes place 3 months into their relationship, a year after Glinda moves in. I have mixed feelings about big time jumps, and I wonder how you feel about them, because for me, I was like, I either wanted less of this fic, like not this end time jump, or I wanted the whole thing. Because it felt like it just skipped all the good part. I was like, you gave me a bunch of like stilted exposition and none of the like relationship, which is what I wanted out of this experience. So I don't know. How did you feel about it?
Oh, I felt the same way. Yeah, I kind of want, like, I always hesitate to send things to you and wanting to add the note. Except the end.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Because it's like, I don't want to detract from your experience. And, you know, yeah, I also agree. I find that time jumps rarely work for me. It's just like, I would rather be there for it, or I would rather you, like, just leave it ambiguous. Like, oh, like, maybe something will happen. And, like, very clearly we as the reader know it will. But you don't have to, like, walk us, like, by the hand and be like, okay, this happened.
I'd agree with that. I think that is exactly where I sort of landed with this, was like, it almost kind of felt like an outline of a story. Like somebody took the outline of the story, added some dialogue, and published that instead of like the meat of the story. That said, I think it had a lot of promise as like, if the author were to go back to this and like fill in how they get to that end chapter, I would read it. Yeah. So it wasn't bad.
Nice.
Yeah. I feel like... Oh, and apparently the last chapter is kind of cute though. They're like lounging on the deck and like Elphaba brings out some water to Glinda, or lemonade to Glinda, and they're like, thank you, Elfie. And it's just like very cute. And I was like, yeah, I definitely like want to read this fluff now. Please give me more fluff in this universe. I'm here for it. So I think overall this to me felt like maybe like a 3 out of 5.
Okay, hey, we'll take it.
Yeah, it was like a good start. I think I would have given it more had there been more of the story.
Yeah. It
probably would have bumped up a little bit. I think the rating style still was a little choppy, but like I could overlook it because it was just kind of sweet and delightful. So yeah, that's my quick and dirty Pizza AU. I'm committed to like trying to keep these episodes shorter now. So
yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So do you want to hop into the Pizza Boy Au I Sent You?
Yeah, really quick. I just want to like touch base on or talk about the Wicked one.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I did not give you a chance to like speak at all.
Yeah, you're like, all right, I'm done. I was like, okay, I guess that's it.
Nope, sorry. I'm
Great.
a giant butthead. Keep going.
No, it's fine. Something I really kind of appreciated about this fic is that I was a huge fan of the novel by Gregory Maguire, on which the musical is based, and I felt like I think this might be more unintentional than actually intentional, but the tone that this is written in, it feels very much like, oh, she said this, and then they do this, and like getting caught up on the minutia. I feel like that's what the novel evoked.
Ooh.
Like, it's been years since I've read it,
Okay.
but it felt very reminiscent of that style, and I was like, huh, you know what? I'm not angry at it. I'm like, is it my favorite? No. And it doesn't have near the same world building that is in the novel, but it was like a good like homage, and I was like, yeah, I'm here for it.
I appreciate that information because I never read the novel. It just was, I think it was just too much for me at the time. Like, it was one of those books.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, reading the Lord of the Rings books or something like that. Sometimes when you have just like a volume that is so dense, you just don't want to commit to it. And that's basically what happened to me when Wicked was, big and popular. I was just like, I'm not in a headspace to read this book. And then I never went back to it. So knowing that it is intentionally or not evocative of the style of the novel is actually kind of interesting. Like, because this is functionally a fan fiction of an adaptation of a source material.
Yeah.
Because the musical is kind of a type of fan fiction.
It's fanfic.
Yeah.
Hot takes.
Yeah. Getting into questions of adaptation is actually fascinating. I took a couple of classes on it in college because I was a theater and film nerd, as I am now. But the question of adaptation versus translation versus just like direct interpretation is always super interesting to me. Where it's like, what makes a good adaptation? And
Right.
that question totally relates to what makes a good fan fiction.
Wow. That is a good point. That's some correlation there I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, it literally just occurred to me. Must have been the kombucha.
Thank you, kombucha.
Yep. I mean, it's good brain juice.
Drink some more.
Okay, I drink the brain juice.
Oh man, incredible.
It's actually just that I'm hydrated for the first time all summer.
Aaron, please.
I will not.
Okay, so should we go into what you sent me?
Yes, especially if you feel that you have been able to say your piece now without me just like jamming this thing down. I feel bad.
You
like,
absolutely
here's my
should
opinion. Goodbye.
You should not, absolutely. That's hilarious. So you sent me a fic on Archive of Our Own called The Pizza King by 65 Writings. It is a Stranger Things fanfic. So let's get like a small round of applause, everyone. This is an episode with all new fandoms. We should be proud.
Fandoms. Holy
Momentous.
shit! Have we been sitting on new fandoms?
So true.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so it's a Stranger Things fic with the pairing of Billy Hargrove and Steve Harrington. Mm-hmm. And the summary reads, Billy Hargrove's got this job. He throws a leaning stack of pizza boxes into the back of the Camaro and drives them to the ungrateful and poor-tipping residents of Hawkins. He resents it in a million different ways for so many different reasons, but if it's good for nothing else, it allows him to see Steve Harrington a few times a week, which is just about the only damn thing he's living for nowadays. Usually it's a wordless exchange of Steve's usual order. However, one night, Billy gets this terrible idea and pulls over on the side of the road. From that night on, Hawkins has one less terrible tipper, and Billy Hargrove says much more to Steve Harrington than nothing at all.
Dun dun dun.
So that's one of this is an interesting summary in that it's like very much a hybrid of that thing we always talk about, which is like, oh, it's just like pulled straight from the fic. Like the first half is, and then the very like last sentence is very much like a summary. I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a way to do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do I think it's particularly effective?
Like if I was like looking on Archive of Our Own and like read the summary, I might not have clicked on it. I would have been like, ugh, it just seems so long, and I would have kept going, which is the truth. But I'm glad that I didn't. I'm glad I read this. I will start by saying that because I very much enjoyed myself.
Yay!
I need again the typical disclaimer. I have not seen Stranger Things.
Alan,
I've
are
seen.
you doing in quarantine?
No.
Jesus Christ!
I'm watching a lot of film.
Oh, shut up. You pretentious butthead. No.
So true. It is so true.
Dislike you immensely. Watch garbage TV like the rest of us. Have you not been watching Unsolved Mysteries? Come on.
No, but on that note, I've been watching this new show called Paranormal Caught on Tape, which is like... Do you know it?
Yes, it's trash.
Yes, I'm obsessed. I was turned on to this by a guy I was talking to on Tinder yesterday.
Holy Jesus. Okay, great.
Yeah, and it didn't work out, but I'm like, hey, at least I got a new show out of it.
Sometimes that's all you need out of a Twitter exchange is like a new thing to watch or something else. Like who cares? Mm-hmm. We cannot like go down this path, but like, yeah, Paranormal Caught on Tape is like prime garbage TV. I live for like garbage ghost hunt TV shows, as you well know from our Poltergeist days.
I know everyone is asking when is the Paranormal Au episode of The Pickless happening?
Never. We're not allowed to do it. It's a cross copyright issue.
Halloween 2020.
Yeah, because we're not going to be out of our houses by then.
That's so true. Oh, too sad, too real. Yes. So I have not seen Stranger Things. I've seen the first half of the first season. So
this hurts me.
Hey, there's 4 seasons, right?
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot happens between
and Billy Hargrove, I believe, doesn't appear until season 3? 4? 2.
Wait, there's 3 seasons. They're launching the 4th season.
There we go.
I was like, wait a minute, that seems like too much. Because him and his sister Max come in at season 2.
Gotcha. There we go. Well, so I definitely have not seen any episodes with Billy Hargrove. But what's new?
Yeah, no one is surprised. That's actually kind of unfortunate, though, because the dynamic of Steve and Billy, I think, in the show, and Billy as a character in this show, is really complicated in ways that are really informed by the original narrative. He's an asshole, and he's kind of irredeemable, and, like... fanfiction pairing him with Steve is fascinating to me because it is kind of the Draco Harry situation where you have a lot to get through, in order to get to a place of having anything close to a healthy relationship. So I don't know how much conversation about that we can actually have if you haven't seen it.
Oh, I mean, listen, do you know how many times I've sat through a summary of The Magicians' entire, like, series? I think we can handle
We set the counter to 0 discussion. For The Magicians. It has been 0 times since we mentioned The Magicians. I did not send you a Magicians pick.
That's true. I'm very proud of you. So, yeah. That being said, let's launch into what this story is about. So, the whole story, I'm going to try to bullet point it. So, Billy works for a pizza place and basically is miserable with his whole life. Like, he is almost despondent. Despondent?
You were right the first time.
Despondent. Damn.
Be confident, Alan.
Ooh. Yeah, so he like, just basically is going through the motions, but he, like, doesn't really care to live. He's, like, smoking ridiculous amounts, and he like mentions like driving with the windows up while he smokes because he just wants to die faster. So I felt like this should have had like a content warning of like supreme listlessness, extreme listlessness or something, because I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
So yeah, and apparently he's in love with Steve, which might read better if you had watched the show and see their dynamic. But since it was like Aaron's making a face.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is a complicated. I'm not going to interrupt.
I cannot wait to hear about this. But since I was reading the fanfic, and as I do with most fanfics, I was like, you know what? Sure. He's in love with him. It makes sense.
Accepted the premise.
Yep, there we go. Accepted the premise. And yeah, basically the only times he like really lives is when he like delivers this pizza to Steve twice a week at his mansion. And so I was like, oh, good for him. Yeah. His stepfather?
Father.
Neil? Even worse. His father, Neil, is an abusive piece of shit. So there's a lot of mentions of abuse, which is unfortunate and very like hard. Like it makes my heart ache, and I was so sad. So one day he's delivering us pizza, and like I think he's reaching a breaking point. He's like, something has to change, and like one way or the other, I just can't keep like balancing on the point of this knife. and literally, and basically pulls over on the side of the road when he's about to deliver Steve's pizza, takes out some loose leaf paper from his glove compartment and writes 5 pages, the world's longest love letter, and then tapes it to the fucking bottom of the pizza box, which is both, like, in any other fanfic, this might have been, like, really cute and endearing and, like, will Steve find it? But in here, you're just like, oh my god, Billy, no, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
Like, you just worry for him so immensely. So he gets to Steve's and he, like, hands it over. And Steve takes it from the sides, like he always does, apparently. And the tape gives out, and so the fucking, like, love letter just swings out from underneath. And Steve is like, and Billy's like, bye, gotta go.
Bye. I gotta run.
And it's, like, this whole thing. So now Billy is, like, living with a fear of what Steve is gonna say, because Billy was a bully. Is a bully in the show, I imagine, and just treated Steve like shit when they were in high school. And so he's, like, fully expecting some reciprocation. And I think, like, 2 weeks go by without Steve ordering any pizza. And so Billy's, like, a sad little boy. He's a sad boy, and he's like, oh, no one loves me.
I mean, yeah, that's functionally what happens.
Am I wrong?
No, you are not wrong. Just, it's a way to put it.
Yep. So one day he's delivering to, like, this apartment, this old, like, ratty apartment that is above a laundromat that coincidentally his family had looked at moving into before. And when they were looking at it, his dad was, like, threatening him, and his mom could hear from the fucking, like, kitchen, and so they moved into a house because apparently the walls were too thin there. Which is so, like, there's just moments where this fic drops like a fucking bomb and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, there were moments that I just had to stop reading and be like, what am I reading? I am so sad all the time.
I forget how gentle of a boy you are.
I'm a soft boy.
You're such a soft boy. And I'm just like, yeah, I know. Like, moving on.
You thrive on this.
Yeah, it was like, I told you, if I read fluff, there's always angst involved.
So he goes to this ratty apartment after remembering that, and turns out Steve lives there now. So Steve is like, come in, and they're, like, talking, and Steve is like, were you pranking me? Were you punking me, essentially? And Billy's like, nope, I mean it. And Steve is, like, having trouble, like, believing that, and Billy, like, straddles him and is like, let me prove it to you. Basically, they bang.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Goes from 0 to 60 real fucking fast.
And then the next morning, Billy leaves without saying goodbye, like classic one night stand type thing. And then for 3 weeks, nothing happens. Like, Billy keeps delivering pizzas to Steve twice a week, but like they go the extra mile to make sure their fingers don't touch, And then one night, Steve orders, Billy goes to deliver, and Steve opens the door, like, wasted, just, like, out of his mind. And he says, oh, where's my drink? And Billy's like, you didn't order one. And Steve says, oh, so this tall glass of water is on you? And it's like, oh.
Oh my god. But you want it to be smooth, and it just kind of isn't.
It's not. Basically because of who Steve Harrington is as a person, and also just because he's drunk off his ass. Yeah. But Billy likes it, and then it's like, wait, no, because you're drunk. Like, you're drunk. And he leaves. He gets back to the pizza place where his boss is like, do you need Steve Harrington? And Billy's like, oh, Steve. Oh, yeah, I think I do. Why? And she's like, well, he's ordered 3 fucking pizzas in the last 20 minutes, so go fucking and ask that you deliver them, so go.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yup. So he goes back, and Steve is now much more sober, and he's like, hey, and Billy says, stop. If you order another goddamn pizza, I'm gonna fucking choke you within an inch of your life. And Steve says, is that a promise? And Billy's like, quirks his eyebrows, so Steve naturally calls for another pizza while he's standing in front of Billy. And it's like, honestly, I was like, ooh, I was affected.
You were floored.
Yes, I was floored. Then they proceed to bang like bunnies, and thus begins, like, this whole, like, kind of relationship where Billy will go over like at the end of his shifts for twice a week after delivering food, and they bang like crazy, and he leaves in the mornings without saying anything. So they have this, like, understanding where, like, Billy doesn't want to talk about it, and Steve, like, is just accepting of this. And you come to find out that it's because that the reason his stepfather, not his stepfather, I just want to make that separation, but it's not there.
It's not there. You just gotta accept the situation for what it is.
So you find out that his father is abusive to him because he found out that he's gay. He was gay, or he is gay. He found out he's gay, and so they moved from California to Hawkins because of it. Mm-hmm. And so there's this whole dynamic where now Billy is like really anxious but also strangely happy, and he doesn't know what to do. And one day they get an order to the restaurant from Steve, so Billy has to go deliver. And he's like, it's much earlier in the day, so he's confused because he's like, oh, are we not gonna bang today? And it's like snowing out a lot too, so he's like he's pissy already. He gets there, and it turns out that Steve is confused. He's like, what do you? And then he's like, oh, they're making you drive in this weather? It's crazy. And then from behind him, you can see that Jonathan Byers and Nancy Wheeler are on the couch, and Billy's like, oh, okay, goodbye. And Steve is like, no, come in. So basically forces them to hang out, and Nancy is like naturally like apprehensive, and then at some like they're gonna watch The Shining, and Nancy and Jonathan are like curled up on the couch, and there's more space because they are curled up. So Steve goes to Billy and says, hey, come sit with me, and Billy's like, no, I don't think so. And they have this back and forth where Steve is like, please, and Billy basically gives in, but he's like super scared because he doesn't know what their reaction is gonna be. And they have a reaction. Nancy like has a moment where she like goes get some more popcorn, I think, to like compose herself, and then comes back and is like super friendly and like really accepting, which is super nice. And they finally established that they're in a relationship.
Yeah. Like
Steve is like, well, come on, like I want them to meet my boyfriend, and he's like, oh, since when am I your boyfriend? And Steve says, since now. And after that, it like the rest of the fic kind of deals with Billy kind of trying to climb out of the hole that he's in his home life. So he's like trying to save up money while he's doing his pizza job to like move out. And Steve is like, hey, so I have a proposition. My dad, needs an assistant to like a smooth talker to close the deals. And I think you'd be perfect for that. So if you are interested. And Billy's like, sure. And so that means that he's going to meet Steve's parents. And there's this like really sweet, like they're progressing. And then the last bit of the fic is a time jump.
Mm-hmm. Again with the time jumps, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very time jump heavy episode. And they're like living in California again. The sky is bright blue, and like they dress nice, and they're like rich and in love, and they sit on the porch, and it's so sweet. And that's the end of the fic.
Yeah.
So my first impression of this was it reminded me a lot of The Catcher in the Rye, which is hilarious because it's one of the books that Billy reads in the middle. Huh. Yeah, it has, if you remember from The Catcher in the Rye, it has this the main character Holden, like he doesn't really care about life. He's just going through the motions, and it's that whole thing of like trying to grow up and not knowing your place in the world, which is not what I think Billy has. I think to an extent it is, but it's also more of a place of like he can't accept himself because he has been ostracized by his father. He's being abused by his father, and so that lashes out in different ways. I'm speaking from strictly the fic. Again, I have not seen Stranger Things, so I don't know how that relates to the narrative of his character, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I was very interested by that. The other thing it strongly reminded me of, there's a whole subsection of queer, like gay cinema that emerged around the 80s and 90s that feels very like this. It's like, wandering gays that aren't accepted by society, trying to like a lot of internalized homophobia. And the one kind of thing that they all have in common is that they all end in tragedy. Like the gay character always dies, because that was really the only way that gay men were perceived during the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. I wonder why that might have been.
Yeah, strange. Who knows?
Stranger things have happened.
Oh my god, I hate you.
I will see myself out.
So that was the vibe I got from the first like 2/3 of this fic. And so the whole time, Aaron, I was on the edge of my goddamn seat, like, oh my god, they're gonna kill him, like his dad's gonna find out and he's gonna kill Bill, and like I was ready to be devastated. And then it didn't come. It was like, oh, literally the time jump threw me so off. I almost felt like it, like I agree, this is one of those moments where I really wish that there wasn't this time jump. Like it should have ended before. Like it's nice because it gave me that sense of closure, like, oh, they're happy, like they've made it, thank god. But also is very like the disparity between that and like the beginning of the fic is so big. I was like, whoa, shook. So yeah, I do. It's an interesting thing where I think that the beginning of the fic is stronger than the end, and it like progresses in that direction. Like I just feel like the tone shifted so much that it became something else entirely. Which, if that's what the author was going for, kudos, nailed it. But it was a little. I don't want to say off-putting, but I was a little like, okay, like trying to wrap my head around it. There is a quote in it that I wrote down because I was like, this feels it. It summed up exactly how I felt about reading this. And it's important to know that when I say the word mourning, I'm talking about like mourning for the dead. Everything feels like mourning, but gilded with gold. And that's kind of what this fic felt like, because the whole time I had this like deep sense of impending doom, but it was beautifully written. Like the prose is wonderful. And then it has these like moments where between Steve and Billy that are just so soft and beautiful. And I wonder also how much of this is coming from my experience as a gay man growing up in the 90s, where all the media I consumed about being gay was this kind of tone. Like if it did it trigger some sort of PTSD that I was like, ah!
No, for sure. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, as we well know from shows that will not be named, the thread of bury your gays is constant, right? Like there's, at this point, we've been conditioned to expect that gay characters will not survive the narrative.
Yeah.
Like it's a shock when they do, let alone if they have a chance at actually coming out the other side somewhat happy. So I think it makes sense that your brain automatically was like, oh, cool. I sense a pattern here. I think it's fascinating that you compare it to Catcher in the Rye, mostly because I have never read Catcher in the Rye.
Aaron.
I know. Which is one of those things where I'm like, I maybe should, but I also don't feel like it, so I'm not going to.
It doesn't read as well when you're an adult, unfortunately.
I'm not surprised by that. I feel like that happens to a lot of like quote unquote great American classics that you have to read in like English class as a child. I think there's so much context from the show that you're missing that is unfortunate, because I think all you really need to know for the purposes of this, and I don't want to completely spoil the series for you, Billy is not a good person. Like, he's just not. You understand why he is the way he is, and the abuse happens in the show. It happens on screen. Like, you know that is what's happening. But he perpetuates that cycle of abuse in a way that makes him responsible for his actions in a way that, like, he is very abusive to Max. He is racist against her friend. He intentionally terrorizes the kids. Like, and he's not redeemed. Like, there is no moment of redemption. Like, what I thought they were going to do heading into season 3 was have some kind of redemption arc for him, which I thought was going to be really complicated to do well, because he's certainly, to me, read as queer coded. He, you know, the show, as you well know, is set in sort of the mid to late 80s. It was the era of, you know, sort of glam rock, hard rock, metal, like thrasher metal, that kind of stuff was all really picking up. So like this is the like heyday of something like Metallica or whatever, and he is very much of that aesthetic. Like he, you know, perms his hair, and he, like, you know, it's huge and filled with hairspray, and he wears skin tight jeans and, you know, a leather jacket, and he's just like a prick. He drives a Camaro, which is like the 80s bad boy thing, but he's, you know, misogynistic, and he's just a jerk. So I think there's been a fandom trend to exploring what a queer or closeted Billy would look like, and because of that coding, but that's not at all what the show did with him. And because of that, I think it can be difficult to have just sort of like plain old sweet you know, stories with him, because you have to reckon with a lot of the damage that he caused, and really he beats the shit out of Steve multiple times, like almost beats him to death at one point. Ugh. And that, if you don't address that in fic, it can be a little tricky. And I am not someone who demands, you know, purity from their fan fiction, because I think that way lies censorship and a lot of problems. Right. But I do recognize that, like, Billy's not a good person. No. So it becomes this really complicated dynamic. So what I liked about this fic is that it is very much in that camp of like, well, what if Billy were queer and that were the reason for what happens to him? And what if he had to reckon with that in some way? and Steve is the pairing that I go for with that. And like I think I just think it's there's a real rich soil to like draw from in terms of just like potential for growth there. Does this always live up to like everything I want out of that? No. Like doing a redemption arc well is really hard. I don't even think this fic was giving a shit about a redemption arc.
I was gonna say, because this one doesn't have a redemption arc.
No.
This is very much like, oh, we forgive you, and if it's really as bad as you say it is, as it sounds, then
it is. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it totally colors your reading of this pairing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to hear you discuss it without any of that context, because I think when you discuss it in context of the show, it becomes very different.
Wow.
I think this fic stands on its own for being well written, and I think it is a good story.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, for me, like with The Magicians, it always comes with a caveat, right? Like there's always that context so informs the reading of the material that you're looking at and the adaptation of the material that you're reading. Like without the original context, it just reads different. So
yeah, I think that is, and that's a really interesting point to make about reading fan fiction in general, is that like a lot of fics will stand on the merits of their narrative that they have created, and like the situations and like the dialogue and how it's written, like this one did for me. And then you have like all of this different, like this rich layer from which to draw like motives and all of that subtext that you wouldn't get in regular fiction.
Yeah.
If you have seen it, like if you know what the show did with them, or the original source material did with them. And it's so fascinating. And it's like, so good. One of the reasons I love fan fiction.
Yeah. It's like metadata almost.
Yes.
It's like an extra layer of information. I also think this fic was written in between season 2 and season 3, which is
I was gonna say
also important, because I think a lot of people thought they were gonna take Billy in a very
they
different
were hoping
direction.
for something.
Yeah. So I think that comes from that, and like I think we've had this conversation with a lot of people, and like I was very in the camp of like, okay, but Billy could become this really interesting redeemed character. They could go on a really interesting redemption arc with him, and then a lot of other people were like, do you really want them to show a like racist, misogynistic, horrific character as like a closeted queer man? And that's a fair point, but I was like,
but it's also interesting to think, like, it's something to think about the context in which that character is brought up, and like that's a very real thing. So would I appreciate a like more openly like gay man who is like confident in who he is and like fights for equality and like women's rights? Yeah, obviously. But like in the time, it just makes sense that it wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be authentic to the era in which this is set.
That, and like the setting that he grew up in, and
exactly.
And the like context of, even in living in California, moving to a small town in the middle of America in the 80s, and coming up against that, and like the culture of, particularly rock music is not known for being, particularly in the 80s, which was a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol and a lot of, let's say, not great treatment of women. And all of that kind of stuff. Like all of that context swirls together into this conversation about what causes Billy to be the person that he is, and that all comes into play, I think, for me when I'm reading it, because I have the context of it.
Right.
And I am not going to talk about it any further because I really want you to watch this fucking show. So,
I'm not going to lie to you, Erin. It is low on the list.
This hurts me.
I'm so sorry.
You wound me deeply. Would you care to rate this fan fiction?
Oh, I would indeed.
1 to 5, as we often do.
As one does. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was greatly affected by it in a very, very interesting way, in a way that I feel like I don't always get affected by fan fiction. So that was a very interesting experience. I would give this a 4 out of 5. Very well written, like narratively strong in what it wanted to achieve. The ending to me is still a little like not the best. It feels to me like we were really excited about writing this, and we wrote like a beautiful beginning and then middle, and then somewhere towards the end we realized we don't know how to end this, and so we're just like, there we go.
Which, like, that's fair. That happens.
That's fair. Absolutely.
Like, cool.
Not a fault at all.
Yep. Totally valid.
All right, so I guess that's the end. Thank you guys for coming to the episode. Make sure you subscribe and you leave tweets and
Yeah.
Oh.
I was like, excuse me, we have a third fan fiction to talk about in this episode. I was like, how long is he gonna go with this bit?
listen. As long as I was waiting for you to cut in at any point, I had to Aaron, come on.
I was waiting for a cue. I did not get one, so
I guess it is hard for you to see it from behind my microphone.
yeah, I didn't want to jump your line. Anyway, we have a third out to read. Question: did you know anything about this show before you read this?
No.
Same. No, hard same. I had no fucking clue. So the Pizza Boy AU that sparked this episode that was sent to us by the lovely, lovely Caitlin is called Pizza in a Movie by Closer. And it is in the Suits fandom. I Wikipedia'd it.
Same.
Because I was like, I'm not watching this thing. I'm not gonna.
It has 9 seasons. You wouldn't be able to.
I was like, this is entirely too much to try to watch. So I just read all the Wikipedia articles about it, and I was like, okay, so lawyers, I guess. And then I just read the fic and called it a day.
You did more than I did. I literally Googled the premise. I was like, oh, lawyers.
Yeah.
Great. And then done.
Cool. I know that there are characters in the show that people really wanted to get together who did. I think it's Donna and Harvey or something are the ship that everybody really wanted. And it happened maybe, but I could be wrong because I don't go here. But I don't know. This fic is between Mike Ross and Harvey Specter, who could frankly be anyone. I don't know.
Aaron.
What a good time. Do you want to read the summary?
Sure, I would love to. So we should mention this is on Archive of Our Own.
Yes, it is.
And the summary says, in an alternate universe, Harvey's still a lawyer, but Mike's not a pot runner. He's a delivery man for Rolo's Pizza and Ribs, which happens to be Harvey's favorite pizza place. Once Harvey finds out his pizza guy is a genius, Mike's life takes a few turns he would not have expected. ... Yes.
The other thing that I think is interesting, and I think we might have touched on this before, but not in any sort of depth or detail, is that this comes from a prompt in a kink meme.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, I didn't see that. I'm just now clicking on it to see what the prompt was.
Yeah. Do you know what a kink meme is?
No,
Okay.
But I assume it is a meme revolving around kinks.
Kind of. So it's kind of an old school fan fiction prompt thing where a lot of different fandoms, if you became more established and a show had a significant enough following, you would develop basically a running thread of prompts, and there would be different types of memes. So there was usually a kink meme, very often an angst meme, sometimes a fluff meme, but kink is obviously going to be the one that's the most popular. And so people would put imagines or prompts for stories on this one long thread. And from there, fanfic writers would fill the prompt. So they would take the thing and just like write the story that somebody had imagined, or take, you know, whatever inspiration it was and write the fic. So that definitely comes from a sort of like pre-Archive of Our Own model of fic sharing and fic writing. It also, I think, I don't know for sure, but I get the sense that that is where some of the tagging for Archive of Our Own comes from, because particularly with kink memes, because you're often dealing with very like graphic things, like, you know, all kinds of things, not just sexual, but like sometimes there would be abuse, there would be there were no big sort of like hard no's, but you had to tag what you were writing, and you had to be really clear about what was in the thing that you were either requesting or writing. I think that might be where the impetus for the like super organized tagging system came from for Archive of Our Own, because there are like, you will get deleted from the kink meme if you don't tag appropriately. Like moderators would tell you that you fucked up. And they'd be like, you have to tag this, you have to tag this. So going back to the kink meme prompt days was very much a like, oh wow, okay, cool. Like my teenage fan fiction experience just like smacked me in the face, where I was like, oh yeah, I remember reading threads of fics that were literally like, fill part 1A, and then like you'd hit the character limit, and then they'd like fill in the next, they'd like post this like whole fic down the line. It was like bananas.
Incredible.
So yeah, I think people still use it mostly as like a prompt area, like Arena. They don't, sometimes people fill them small on there, but it's fascinating to me to see it still being used. And it's cool that they exist for like every show. Like that's kind of what's interesting about it, is like I definitely spent a lot of time in the Glee kink meme. As a teenager, we don't have to talk about it.
I love it.
Yeah, but there's usually one for every major fandom. That's my contribution to fandom history with Aaron for this episode.
Yeah, what a rich history fanfic has.
Yeah, it's like crazy how it evolves and changes over time and all that.
So how do we tackle this?
I don't know.
Who gives the summary?
I'm usually faster with summary.
That is not true, ma'am. You were faster today, and then you and I fluctuate with how fast the summaries are.
I don't care for your facts, sir. You don't like them. You don't want them. I mean, I don't know. Like, there's almost a piece of me that wants to just read the prompt, because the prompt is like very much the story. Let people go just read the story on their own, not necessarily summarize it in detail, and then just like talk about it. Does that work?
Okay.
All right. So the prompt that it's based on says, Harvey's still a lawyer, but Mike's the pizza delivery boy for Harvey's favorite pizza place. Mike's seen Harvey in almost all states of dress/undress because Harvey calls on him at all times when he's with various one-night stands. They have this fun, quirky little friendship where they quote movies to each other, maybe make recommendations for what to see. I think it'd be cool if Mike recommended something that wasn't even out yet, and he'd get twitchy thinking that Harvey would tell on him for having it illegally, but Harvey just asks if he can borrow it. Then IDK, Mike's always telling Harvey he needs to try the stuffed crust pizza, and Harvey goes on that he's not a child. I just really want to see them reach the point where the leggy blondes who Harvey takes home joke and tease that he flirts more with the pizza boy than he did with them, and they all just assume Harvey and Mike are sleeping together and are in some kind of open relationship. Harvey starts inviting Mike in at the end of his shift to watch baseball matches or whatever, and I just want fluffiness. Maybe it can end with porn? I don't even mind. I just want them being really awesome friends. This became a lot more about like romantic relationship than that prompt would suggest. I would say that's the main deviation there, is that like they were not friends. They were boyfriends.
I mean, they were friends that were dating and didn't realize it, or one of them didn't.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I like, most of my notes are, oh, they like each other. Ooh, a slow build. Ooh, they like each other so much. One of my notes is, ooh, a tiff, which means they probably fought at some point. I don't know.
They did.
Yeah, they basically slowly develop a very close relationship, and that translates to, being together towards the end of the fic, which the prompt doesn't really ask for, but right. I thought it was great.
And I think that the major plot point here also is that Mike's grandmother's in the hospital and like needs better care, and he can't afford it, and he's like bitching, or like not bitching, he's like very emotionally
a woman is dying, Alan.
he very emotionally is like pouring his emotions out to Harvey one day, like, because he doesn't know what to do, and Harvey's like, well, you have photographic memory, so you can become like a legal consultant, etc., and basically gets him a job with his company and like saves the day. And Mike is trying to like feel at ease with this whole being worth more than just a pot dealer, which I assume a good portion of it is from the show. I don't know, I haven't seen it.
From the Wikipedia read I did, he gets kind of plucked by Harvey because of his photographic memory, but he's a pot dealer at the time. The way that this story deals with that instead is that his ex-boyfriend was a pot dealer, and there was a bad situation that really scared him off of that track. So now they
weren't dating. It was just a friend.
Or friend. I'm sorry, you're right. His friend was a pot dealer and got caught up in a bad situation and died. And that really scared him off of that track. And so he's been, slinging pizzas instead or whatever. But like clearly just like punching below his weight intellectually. And Harvey plucks him from that instead.
Yeah.
And my understanding of the show is that he basically isn't qualified for the job that he has. Like he does not have a JD or whatever it is that he needs to be doing the work that he's doing.
Right.
So that is one of the major secrets kept early on in the series, and like certain people start to find out, and like that's like one of the big pieces of drama.
Interesting. That makes
sense. As far as I know. That could be wrong. Don't come for me.
Spoiler, in the fic, it's not a huge deal. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
They're like, just take your bar exam. You'll be good.
Yeah, well, everyone's like, all right, you can't get your prostitute boyfriend a job here just because you like him.
Which I was like, yes.
I was like, yeah, that's hilarious. That's actually super funny. One of my notes is Caitlin understands my fanfic needs, LOL.
Dude, same. I had the same thought. I also read this right after I read the Pizza King, so I was in a very like moody place, and then I started reading this. I was like, oh, it's 30,000 words. Caitlin, be gentle with me. And she was. Caitlin like understood my needs. I was like, wow. I feel like Caitlin has found the perfect like in between Aaron and I fic. Like it would just fit so perfectly in the middle.
She's so good.
I loved it. I had a great time. It was very fun.
Yeah. My final note was, okay, this was delightful.
Agreed.
Even like I had little nitpicky moments. Like I think at one point I was like, there's an interesting power dynamic at play here. I don't think it gets resolved. And then I was like, I kind of don't care.
Yep, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, well, because like Harvey solves a lot of Mike's problems, and like
Yeah.
there's a power dynamic there. But I was like it's not egregious enough that it bothered me. It was like, oh, you believe that Harvey just wants to help, so like cool, whatever. It was just like super fun, and like I really enjoyed it. It wasn't nearly as porny as I thought it was gonna be, because when
I know. What the heck?
Because there's a piece of me that like I know Caitlin was very much like, I love Pizza Boy I use because they always end up being smutty, and I was like, God bless Caitlin.
Yes.
But this was like not smutty basically at all until like the end. Like I mean, yeah, there's like mentions of sex throughout the whole thing, but they don't really like.
And the smut is like a hand job. So like
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
There was a line towards the end that I like wrote down because it was funny, which was, quote, at some point, end quote, he told the top of Harvey's head, quote, we are actually gonna have sex.
Yes.
And I was like, bless. Like,
Speaking of quotes, I wrote two that I loved from this fic. One that I thought was for sure going to be like the total thesis of the story, and that was when everyone kept calling. Oh, so one of Harvey's like old flames came to Mike and told him basically stay away because she was jealous, and called him a twink with a pizza box.
I wrote that down too. I couldn't remember the context, so I couldn't bring it up, but I did write twink with a pizza box.
I died. Love it. We love a twink with a pizza box.
We live. Oh, so good. That was so funny.
And then at the very end is Harvey basically reveals his feelings for Mike, and Mike is like, I don't know. There's a lot of things we like have to navigate between like, you know, me thinking that you didn't just hire me because you wanted to get in my pants, and you feeling that I'm not trying to repay you for the job by sleeping with you.
Yep.
And Harvey says, I like to have a plan. Then Mike responds, oh, what, your plan only got as far as seduce the pizza boy?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think I also wrote a note towards the end of my notes that says, yes, honest communication. So clearly they resolved it to some degree of success. I just don't remember how they did it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they were just very open and honest the entire time.
Yeah.
It was really well done. I had a really good time.
Yep, me too. It was
And
super great.
guess what, Aaron? This ends with a time jump, goddammit.
I know, it does. It does.
A 3.5-year time jump. And I was like, what on God's green earth is happening here?
You know, I didn't pay attention in the moment, didn't make note of this until right now, and now I'm like, Erin, dear child, how did you miss this? But I did.
I was shook. And basically, yeah, the time jump is basically like the dean of Harvard has heard of his accomplishments and is like, oh, you only have one more semester of like law school. Why don't you transfer to Harvard, do your last semester here, and then you can be hired by the company, because the company only hires Harvard grads.
And I wonder if that's from the show, because that seems like very much like
Oh,
something.
yeah, very specialized.
Yeah, I was like, that's a really specific scenario, and I feel like I haven't seen the show, so I don't know. But there was something about it that read like somebody translating canon into fan fiction in this episode, like epilogue. So I wonder if that's what happened to the show, and that was why it happened. I think this was, of the time jumps, the most well done.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah, it didn't feel out of place at all. It felt like, okay, no, this is like a realistic thing that probably would happen. And it was also still like really in fitting with the tone, and like the characters still spoke similarly, and like, yeah, it didn't like lose anything.
Because you know what this is, Aaron? This is not, it is a time jump, but it's not a time jump as an ending. It's a time jump as an epilogue.
Yeah, and that's a different beast. You're
Agreed.
totally right. Yeah.
You know what the other crazy thing is? This was completed in 2011.
Holy shit, I didn't even read that.
9 years ago. And I feel like this fic, like sometimes fics you can tell are of their time because like they like don't necessarily age well, especially with the advances in technology. But this one, like just now I'm noticing, and I was like, oh shit, I did not for a moment stop and think about that. I mean, they do talk about the second reboot Star Trek movie, which I guess should have been like a hint, but
Oh, Yeah, it didn't occur to me because I haven't seen that either, so it didn't really matter. It's like that could have happened at any time.
Can I also say I am obsessed with the prompt? I was dearly hoping that it was a show thing, but I guess not, since it's mentioned in the prompt about them quipping movie quotes back at like each other.
Yeah.
I live for that cute shit.
Someone who actually watches this show, please confirm that that's a show thing, because I want it to be so badly, but like I'm not willing to watch the show to find out. So yeah, please keep. Oh, and also let me know if Lewis and Kyle are assholes in the show, because those two, like, Lewis is an asshole, Kyle's a moron, which, like, yeah, cool. Like, I want to know if that characterization tracks.
And I want to know about the grandmother. Is the grandmother a key character in the show?
I'm
is
pretty
she
sure
actually sick?
That I'm pretty sure is legit. I'm pretty sure that's canon.
No.
Yeah, I think what happens in this show, do you care if I spoil it from my little Wikipedia?
No.
I didn't think so. You're like, no, sweetie, I do not care. I think what happens is she's sick the whole, like, first couple seasons, and, like, halfway through the run of the show, she actually does die. Sorry.
Grandma.
Sorry, Grandma. So I think I could be misremembering, but I think that was what I read. But he definitely, like, was supporting her. Like, that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was, like, a premise.
Wow. Now I'm sad.
I know. Sorry. Here's my question for you. We have, like, two options for rating here.
Uh-huh.
Option 1 is we both offer a rating and then it averages out between the two.
Oh, yeah.
Or we have to agree on a rating.
Oh, we should definitely not agree. You will never give ever in your life. You will like, if you feel so strongly about something, you'd be like, you're wrong.
I mean, yeah, that's just how I am as a person. It's almost like you know me. It's like a person in life.
I also am going to be so amused if we ever have one of these things, like another shared fic reading where you just despise it and I love it. So the rating, like, you rated a 1 and I rated a 5 and it ends up averaging a 3 and you're just going to be so upset.
I'm like, that's incorrect. Try again. Yeah. I, again, dislike your facts. I hate them. Okay, so what is your rating for this fic?
I would give it a 4.5. Very enjoyable. I will this is like, usually I say, like, oh, I'll come back to this eventually, and that's true. Like, every now and then I'll get in the mood for a fic I've read and I'll reread it. I think this is a fic that I'll probably get a hankering for a lot sooner than some of the other ones we've read. Mm-hmm. It was so up my alley. It was so funny. It was touching at moments. It was dealt with everything well. It was also such a rich universe in a way that was not intimidating, where I was like, oh, I don't really understand what's happening. Like, it was like, you could almost take this as an alternate season 1 of Suits, and I would believe it.
Yep. No, I totally agree. The number I had in my head for rating this was 4, which for me is high. I know this.
Oh, yeah.
But everything that you just said, I absolutely agree with. I think you're totally right. And I really love that it was accessible and still enjoyable without much, if any, fandom knowledge. Like, I didn't have to know too much to still enjoy the story.
Exactly.
But it would have only been made better by knowing the story.
Exactly.
Which is really cool and, like, hard to pull off, even in the best of fan fictions. Like, I don't know that that's even a metric by which to judge fanfic, but I enjoyed that this particular scenario, that worked out super well. Mm-hmm. And the writing style was just so well done. Like, it read so smoothly, and
yeah.
I really, sometimes I get, sometimes, and we talk about this a lot, like, it's really hard to write dialogue well, but it can also be really hard to write prose if you are someone who is more drawn to dialogue. Mm-hmm. I thought both of them held equal weight in terms of skill, so I wasn't sitting there being like, okay, the dialogue in this is really dumb, or whatever it is. Like, yeah, I just thought the whole thing was just really well done.
It felt organic.
Mm-hmm. And there was a consistency of it that was really interesting. I felt like a really well thought out plot too. Mm-hmm. Like, it felt paced well, and just in general, I think it was really successful. Agreed.
The only kind of, and it's not necessarily a knock on the author. It's probably just because I'm not the brightest when it comes to law stuff. When Mike is finally working at the law firm and, like, consulting, they, like, talk about all these cases that they're working on, and I was like, well, I understand exactly 0 of what's happening, and I don't understand how high the stakes are.
That's fair. I don't understand either, but I just pretended that I got it and moved on. It's like, it's cool. Us theater nerds know jack shit about any of this stuff.
So then, does this mean we average out to 4.25?
Mm-hmm.
I dig it.
It's one of the highest rated fics of this,
That is
this
not
whole
true.
series.
We've had no in my I've rated quite a few 5s.
Yeah. Well, I've given you the 5s because I have impeccable taste. Ooh, if you could see the look on his face, y'all. Ooh, if you could see it.
That, or I just have, realistic expectations.
I don't want you to speak the truth because it reflects poorly on me as a person.
But that was so delightful, Caitlin. Thank you so much for sending that in. It was honestly a perfect weekend treat for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a reminder to our listeners that if you want to send us a fan fiction to read, and by reminder, I mean, hello, this is the first time we've done this, but whatever. If you want to send us a fan fiction to read, be it yours or somebody that you just really love, whatever, please check out our Twitter. There is a Google form that I will repost to the top of the page when this episode airs, so that way you can just submit a Google form completely anonymously if that's what you'd prefer, because this has been super fun and I want to do this more because being forced out of our comfort zone has been delightful. So make sure to check us out on social media, Twitter, Tumblr, whatever. Send us recommendations because this is super fun.
There's also something very delightful about being able to chat with Erin about something and not be nervous about how badly she hated my pick, or to know how fucking gloating, how much she's gonna gloat when I give it a 5.
Oh my god. Okay, well, just because something is true doesn't mean you have to say it for the record. Alon,
there's a lot of truth bombs.
I just feel like I came here to have a good time. I'm feeling very attacked right now.
Future Alan, when we post this, can we title this Time Jumps and Truth Bombs?
You're like, please remember to title this. I'm going to cut it from the episode just to spite you, so that way you have to remember that that's what you said, because that's what happens when you drop a bunch of truth bombs on your friend who has all the editing power. You're going to sound awful this episode.
Oh man, it's so true.
Anywho.
And with that, I think we are at the end of our episode.
Yeah, we're at the end of our ropes. It's cool.
That too, but more immediate is the end of this episode. So as Erin mentioned, please make sure to follow us on social media, interact, send us your fix. We would love to read it.
Follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Instagram. We are now on Podchaser, which is dope. I don't know what Podchaser is, but it was free, so I signed us up. They're actually really cool. They're just like a collection of podcasts. They just pull the feeds and whatever. There are lots of ways you can get in contact with us. You can follow along with what we're reading on a Google Doc that I make, because this is who I am as a person, where I give you all the links to all of the things that we read. There is that Google form that I was mentioning earlier. If you really feel like emailing us, we do have an email address, and it's called theficlist@gmail.com. I don't know why you would need to email us. Maybe you want to sponsor us. I don't know.
Just throwing it out there.
That'd be cool. Please leave us a rating or a review somewhere, because we only have one, and it's from our really good friend Katie, who is not Caitlin, but is, again, one of very few people who actively listen to this podcast. And she was real nice and left us a review. So thank you, Katie. Please, other people, maybe just say, not bad or something.
It also helps to reach other people who might need a safe space to talk about fandom and fan fiction.
That's the much more serious way of asking. Alan was being more sincere than I was.
Do your part,
Yeah, support your local indie podcaster, because boy, do we have nothing else going on right now.
And on that cheerful note, we will see you guys next time.
Bye.